Yeah, so let's dive into that a little bit more,
Yeah.
because I think this is one of the big challenges that a lot of studios are going to have difficulties with in the Web3 gaming space. Um,
Hmm.
in typical games, you've got some measure of power creep that you have to
Yeah.
introduce, right? Because you want players to continue to want to stay engaged, and if the
Hmm.
original version of a character that I get or an item is the most powerful, there's there's no incentive from a competitive standpoint with me pushing forward to try and get whatever's next,
Yeah.
whatever's been released. And so in traditional gaming, it's not really a problem. That's really more
Hmm.
of a feature. However, as we look at the way that most players in Web3 gaming today are investors, I think this is a short term problem
Yeah.
that will eventually go away. But if I buy the Genesis version in Web3 right now, people assume, well, I was here first and earliest, and therefore, everyone else after me is sort of exit liquidity, and I want to make sure that my initial investment maintains its value. There's no dilution, and I think those two different maybe approaches are problems when it comes to Web3 gaming, because you need
Yeah.
to have an economy that allows you to grow and progress, which by
Yeah.
definition means the people that got in first, they have an advantage from like a knowledge standpoint and a game mechanics and understanding, and maybe they've been able to build
Mm.
up assets and work in the game. But you also can't have those be the only NFTs or in-game assets that have meaning and value. So you guys have a pretty
Mm.
interesting approach to trying to handle that with the characters and the upcoming releases. So maybe tell us how you're trying to address that issue.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of talks with the community in Discord or just even on Telegram, people who message me about this because yeah, their instinct is, oh, you're increasing supply. This is bad. And it's like, look, guys, games will not work unless we can solve this problem. And there's just like a fundamental feeling in Web3 that people, like you said, they're coming really from the investment side only. And they're thinking, hey, I want high quality, low supply, and a way to generate revenue all the time off everything. And I never want you to, don't ever mess with this, right?
Mhm.
And but games need to continue working. You need to evolve. You need to keep adding content. You might do interesting collabs. And how do you do this? And right now, at least with a lot of NFT marketplaces, it's messy. If you put every single one of these in a new collection, that might sound or look okay in the beginning, but you imagine 3 years later, you're trying to manage 20 collections and everything's broken up. It just doesn't work. It doesn't
Mhm.
work as games as a service. It doesn't work at all. What we're trying to do is find a nice balance in between, like how do we respect that people don't want to feel that you invested into an expensive NFT. And these are,
Mhm.
they're not cheap, right? They're not cheap no
Mhm.
matter what level you get into it. Even if you got them an extremely low ETH, it's expensive, right? Even if you bought up the secondary market of somebody else, it's a big choice that players have to make. So we want to respect that people who give us that kind of faith and want to come into this project, that we're looking out for their best interest too and making feel that this is something that it's worthwhile to invest in it. But how do we also scale that and it works with game
Mhm.
mechanics? And it wasn't an easy decision. It wasn't an easy design to kind of come with. And maybe we have to make some tweaks because we're very early on. But the way that we're looking at it is we're going to have different characters, and each one of these characters has a fixed supply. So, Ninsiku has 750, and there'll never be more Ninsikus. We'll never make more. It's kind of guarded and it's kind of protected. And when it comes into like power creep, it's not necessarily, oh, one character was the first and this is the best that we'll ever make and everything less
Mhm.
is less. It's just they do things differently. It's meant to be like they have one skill or maybe one thing they do which is a little bit different than somebody else. And there's a lot of different diversity in terms of how you want to be using these characters. Maybe having Nitsiku in a certain type of building has the chance to modify the output. So now you're kind of making a strategy with different chosen in different buildings, or we have that kind of seasonal event, which is all about ancient cultures. So you're really kind of diversing your strategy with that, not necessarily with the idea that one is like a master chosen better than all in all scenarios. It won't be like that.
Mhm.
But What we want to do though is the ability that we can release new characters and people feel like, hey, we're not increasing the supply. Yes, the collection size itself increases, but your rare Ninsiku is always the rarest Ninsiku.
Mhm.
And that's always kind of protected and it's there. And it's always going to be in demand because, like I said, Ninsiku is going to have certain things that they can do in the game that the other chosen can't. And there's going to be a reason when somebody really wants Ninsiku. And the example that I kind of gave it to at least people who play a lot of games, it's like, when you play Fortnite or anything else, and you see a person with a skin from season 3 or the season 5 event or whatever it might be, you don't feel like, oh shit. You get more excited. You're like, oh shit, that's an OG. He is
Mhm.
wearing this skin at this event. Like, oh man, I wish I could have got that.
Yeah.
And to me, that's how you're going to be seeing these shamans and just other character release. That as this collection grows, Zola becomes more rare because there's more characters that kind of fill that collection. And if you have her and you're a holder of that, that's something like, wow, like that's pretty rare. I can't believe you got her. That's
Mhm.
cool. And you really stand out more, if anything else, into the pool, right? Instead
Mm.
of you're just seeing Nisiko now, but think about if you had 40,000 different characters. That Nisiko seems pretty rare in that kind of mix now in that pool. And I think it's more fun.
Mhm.
And it lets us sort of like, maybe we want an interesting collaboration with Illuvium. Maybe we do something with Marvel one day. Who knows, right? But it's that idea that things that have purpose and that make sense in the game, you can introduce it, and you're not really, like I said, diluting your character. We're just kind of
Mm.
adding and making that supply more diverse. But I think it actually makes your character more exciting. And I know it's very difficult right now because we're so used to NFT collections and how they fundamentally should function right now for these PFP collections. But we need to be thinking like, how do games work in this space?
Mhm.
How do we make this work so a game can actually last for a long time? Because a lot of the games right now don't worry about this because they're not really planning to be around in like 16 months.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, they don't, they're
I
going to
think
have
that's
issues of,
Yeah, I think that's right. That yeah, that the time horizon is very different
yeah,
for a Web3 uh focused project as opposed to a gaming focused project.
yes,
Um
yes.
and we look at, we look at what's going on in the industry as a whole. I really want to lean into this question about um how we're building and how we're leveraging the technology specifically on the AR side
Yeah.
for you guys, because there's been a lot of, maybe not a lot, there's been a number of gaming projects that have really tried to embrace this. I think probably the most obvious is Pokemon Go, that most
Mhm.
people listening to this are going to be familiar with.
I think
And
everyone should know that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and we've seen. I think we've seen a mixed reaction, right? People tend to like AR and they think it's cool, and then after a while they're like, oh, okay, well that was fun, but like I'm not seeing the meaningful engagement with it.
Mhm.
On one of the recent casts that I did on Gaming on the Block, we had Andrew Wall on from the Illuvium
Mhm.
team, and we chatted for a while about Oculus hardware and what we're seeing in the space with other companies. Sort of who's going to win the hardware wars for AR VR technology. I know this is a space that you guys are really, really trying to make sure you incorporate well. What's your take on the future of this AR tech and how this is going to evolve over the next years in Web3 in general?
I think the first thing to say is we're not new to AR. And anyone listening, do a quick Google search of Directive Games AR, and you'll see we were keynote speakers at Apple's conference twice, 2 years. Only games company do it, where we talked about the
Mm.
machines AR, and we were building in this space for years, and we have a very kind of strong understanding of what you can do and like what we want to do with it. And I think for us, definitely mobile is the focus for AR. Obviously we're excited about the idea, if Apple ever releases AR glasses, because I think we all can kind of agree when Apple does something, it's now mainstream. That's just the way it works, right? And we know that when they're not going to do something unless they kind of feel confident about it. And I think that's still quite far away, but we know it's in the horizon.
Mhm.
But you can see with like on your mobile phone, like AR interactions with it, it's fun. There's some cool things with it, But yeah, you can cross a line where it gets kind of gimmicky, or it's not quite as exciting, or like get tired of it. So I think what's important for us right now is not making AR a core mechanic that blocks people from the rest of the game, that you have to
Mm.
engage with this AR. And I think what makes it fun right now is like an additive experience.
Mm.
So when it comes to sort of like getting resources in geolocation, there's a lot of resources we're going to have that can only be found in geolocation. And that makes it like there's an effort to go out and be strategic and get it. But we know at the same time, if you wall that off completely, it kind of hurts the game too, because people feel like, oh, I don't have access. And this is kind of why, if
Right.
you have a chosen, you can send them out on expeditions. You're basically sending your chosen out on their own to do like missions in AR and go
Mhm.
try to find things. And they'll bring things back after a day or a week or whatever kind of you set as your parameters for that mission. But you lose the strategy of being focused on what you want to get. So they might bring back things you don't need or you don't want, but that's
Mhm.
just part of that sort of RNG of it. But
Right.
if you actually want to go out now, you're focused, you can kind of make choices like, I just want to be picking ore today. That's all I'm collecting. And
Mhm.
it's a very kind of like strategic choice, and you'll benefit more from that.
Mm.
Now, the AR mini games are really exciting to me, has that kind of fun experience for people who want to go outside to pick these resources, because they break up the grind, and they're
Mhm.
not meant to be like you're not invested of sitting for in front of a Starbucks for 45 minutes. They're meant to be like 2 minute of experiences, and you can do something fun, play some kind of mini game, get some rewards. And it's this idea that we know as developers, we can start releasing games quite often into the space and really giving you different things to kind of try and break up that grind. And
Mhm.
I think people will get into it. And the reason why we want to start incorporating some of these tools, which are not part of the core mechanic now, but kind of getting into it, is like I said, we're looking long term. We're looking at like, okay, where's technology going to be in 2 years or 3 years or five
Mhm.
years or 8 years or 10 years? And I think we can all agree that a full AR game wouldn't work today. And
Mhm.
even Pokemon Go is not really an AR game. It has some AR
Right.
features, but you can turn them off, because
Mhm.
even then they know like
And
putting that barrier, that wall right now isn't good
yeah.
game design. And we're doing the
Yeah.
same. We're making sure we don't make this as a walled experience, but they're there and they're fun, and there's some incentives around it. So
Mhm.
people will have the chance to do it, but you're not forced into it. But as AR becomes more of a thing and it grows over time in tech and tools, I'm confident to know like in the future, it's going to be a thing that we're all just used to, right?
Mhm.
And we're going to have a game that's already scaled and built up and have that kind of capabilities to grow with tech changes. And I think
Mm.
that's a big part of our focus, is just never thinking necessarily short term.
Right. Now that makes a lot of sense, and I think you want a game where people would rather use the technology than not, and it's not a competitive
Yeah.
disadvantage like it is in Pokemon Go, for instance.